I'm Ewan Bleach. I play clarinet, saxophone, piano, and vocals. I play old-style jazz, 20s and 30s stuff. I run an orchestra, and I also write original music as well.
Okay, so tell me how you managed to get into music, because you play about 5 instruments.
Okay, so I started playing the clarinet when I was 7. But I must have already been messing around on things before then. But I started proper lessons when I was 7, and then when I was 9 I started playing the piano, and when I was 12 I was lent a saxophone by a family friend, and I was like, it doesn't make sense to play classical music on the saxophone, so I thought I'll learn jazz, and I didn't know what jazz was, but by the time I was 13 I decided that I was going to make my life as a jazz musician, and that was it. That's all I wanted to do. And I started out, my mum had 2 jazz records in the house, 2 Miles Davis records, Kind of Blue and In a Silent Way.
Oh, cool.
And so I started out in that world of Miles Davis and all that. And then when I went to study, when it came to time to study, when I was 18, I went to London I studied modern jazz at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. But by that point, I've been hanging out a lot, just taking my saxophone to festivals and jamming along with DJs and stuff. I used to like just to play for a party, so the modern jazz started to be a little bit. It seemed to not make so much sense to me. I didn't like I like the idea of playing for dancers, and during the time at college when we did some projects, it wasn't until the 3rd year that we did a project in 1920s jazz. I realised that this music really resonated with me, because that was the rave scene, Chicago, the bright lights of Chicago, 1920s, and because I was during my time in London, I was studying, but I was also going to jam sessions, playing like Afro funk, Afro beat, reggae jam sessions over in Dalston till 7 a.m. on a Monday night, on a Sunday night, going to college and saying, why are we playing this, this modern jazz stuff that people can't dance to? So I found old jazz almost through a route of being into playing music in a social situation, as opposed to that I was particularly, you know what I mean? I mean, I also, a side note is that I was always, I always loved the old Billie Holiday records, so that was already in my mind, but I didn't think back in the day that anyone would play that music now, whether it was relevant to play it now. I thought it had to be forward-looking. But yeah, in my 3rd year of college, I discovered Sidney Bechet, and that blew my mind, and I became obsessed with him. And that was my thing. So.
See, I was going to ask you what attracted you to music of the 20s and 30s, but I think you've already pretty much answered it. So I would like to ask you, would you have liked to have played in a speakeasy in the 20s and 30s?
I don't know. I mean, I guess so.
Yes, so.
I mean, it depends on the speakeasy, because sometimes I get a bit fed up when everyone's just, shouting it away, and I don't know. I think
if they're in there for music instead of drinking. Or,
I mean, I don't. I want to remain politically neutral. I mean, about these things. My dream is a place where people dance and they listen, and somehow I think people don't seem to think those two things can exist in the same place.
Right.
But also I'd like to be in. It's funny, isn't it? It's just a balance. It's a bit of everything,
Yeah.
But yeah, I used to have a speakeasy of my own when I finished college. Well, during my last years at college, I lived in a place and we ran our own jam session. It wasn't a legitimate venue, and people could do whatever they wanted in there. So I actually would have. Of course, I mean, it would feel like home, I imagine.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it you had the Cakewalk Club?
Yeah, I had the Cakewalk Cafe, but before that I was living in a place called the George. We lived in this old Victorian pub, and we ran music downstairs. We kept the downstairs as a pub, but it didn't have a license or anything. We'd get in barrels of beer and we'd charge at the door, and by 8 o'clock we'd have to close the door, because everyone was like, wow, this is a great place, you can smoke inside.
Yeah.
And so we had these jam sessions, but we always finished by midnight. We didn't want to upset the neighbours, but we effectively had a weekly speakeasy. I mean, that Tuesday jam session was the beginning for me, because at first I was like, I want to embrace music from everywhere. I tried to run a jam session where I included all different kinds of music. Then at one point I was like, actually, what if I just say this jam session is just a 1920s jazz jam session? And suddenly all these musicians crawled out of the woodwork, and we just had these great sessions. And then it was during that period that I started running this weekly gig, which I did for 12 years in Dalston. So that was that.
When you did the pub thing, did you have any problem for the authorities?
No, never.
Really?
No.
Okay. So let me ask you. Basically, you must have played on a lot of records. I mean, I know you've got your own sort of like record music out and stuff. I know you played with Cheapy Skinny as well. Obviously, that's going to be mentioned. You did an album with them in 2019. But what's very interesting, you told me earlier that there was a lot of unreleased stuff that you did with them.
Oh, I don't know if we can really talk about that. No, there's just a few things that maybe just personal things I've got from that time.
Okay.
I don't know if we can include that really, whether they want to.
Do you think it'd ever get released, or?
I don't know.
Have you got a record?
I meant to start one called Old Style Records, but I've only got 2 records on there, and I don't promote them very well.
Okay.
But I would, I've independently released some things, and I thought it'd be good to have a name of the record label. I've got quite a lot of unreleased stuff, basically.
Can you tell us some of the places you played? Because you must have played all over the world.
Well, I haven't really travelled that much. I mean, I've done a lot of playing in Europe and stuff,
What about New Orleans? You ever played there?
Been to New Orleans, played with Cheapy Skinny there.
How did that come about? How did you?
Well, I decided to. I think. Well, it's a funny thing. I think I wasn't planning to go there, but then a musician came over from there, and he jammed with us, and he said you should come over, and I thought that would be nice to sort of. So I decided to go really, and I decided to go for 3 months for the maximum visa time. I had no connections at all. I just showed up, and I had one connection. I had a connection to John Rodley, plays in a band. Well, it used to be in the New Orleans Jazz Vipers, then in Cottonmouth Kings, and I just got straight off the plane and I went to his place, and the place where he was playing, and I sat in with his band, and I stayed on the bar lady's couch the first night, and then the second night found somewhere else to crash, and then I think on the 4th day I met Cheapy Skinny and I joined the band pretty much straight away.
I've seen some of the videos are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got so many views on it. Well, it was tremendous band. Are they ever going to come up? Do you ever think they're ever?
I
going to
have no idea. I can't answer any of those questions.
So when you were at Cheapy Skinny, tell me, I was talking to Ella Pavlis the other day, and she was talking about. I was talking to her about the freight train jumping. Did they get you jumping on freight trains at all? Did you do that?
Oh, none of that stuff.
Would you do it?
I think it's a federal offence, so it's troublesome if you're British, because you wouldn't be able to come back to the States for a long time.
Okay, that's good.
I mean, I don't know. I never had the opportunity, I guess.
Do you do session work at all?
Yes, I do session work.
Right. So, how many albums do you reckon you've played on in your career?
I have no idea.
No idea. But how many?
I mean,
can you give us some sort of mate?
Well, I mean, I don't do that much session work, and I mean, I'm not doing any at the moment, so.
Okay.
If anyone wants to hire me, they can. I mean, I specialise in a lot of things. I have all sorts of instruments that I can play.
Yeah.
How many bands are you in?
Well, that's maybe the most important thing to talk about, is how you're here at my gig, and we haven't talked about the fact that I'm playing with my own orchestra right now as we speak.
We've got that. We worked that out. This all right, and you've also got a quartet.
Well, yeah, I released an album under the name of a quartet. I play in this venue, which is over there, as you can see, we're outside, called Jamboree, and
good advert.
and I play there every Thursday night with a band called Cable Street Rag Band, which we ran in the original Jamboree, which is a smaller band, focusing on the New Orleans style collective playing. But I also have this orchestra, the Fleeting Paradise, which is a big project of mine. I've transcribed a lot of music myself by ear off the old 20s records, written out the parts, and the most exciting thing for me and the most important thing for me as a musician is that I'm writing original music for that orchestra, which the whole point is it's original music that comes out of my head. It's not supposed to sound like any particular style, but the most important thing is it's music that you can dance to, and even more specifically, you can swing dance to. So.
When I looked you up, there was 8 members in the band. Now today there's 10.
Well, this band has never been any less than 10.
Okay.
But it can be up to 12 if we add violin and vocals. Tonight it's 11 actually. This afternoon it's 11.
Okay.
I'm just questioning the time here.
Okay, so so basically, let's wrap it up then.
Mm-hmm.
John, would you like to ask any questions?
Oh, just tell us a little bit about your dancing. You can dance Charleston.
Oh, well, I just know how to do a bit of something like Lindy Hop. I've always just tried to get involved. That's something I've always liked when I have been abroad. That between the sets, if there's a DJ playing, I get up and dance with a few people. I mean, I'd like to know more. I mean, specifically, I'd like to learn more than just swing dancing. I'd like to learn more about waltzing and tango and all that
I
stuff.
can't dance for shit. I learned to do one dance ever, and that was a twist. That's it. That's all I can do, and that's because I saw Pulp Fiction. I thought, yes, I'm learning that. Other than that, I can't dance. But
Amazing.
it's amazing. I don't know about that.
So when are you playing here again?
I'm playing here in about 1 minute's time, probably. I mean, I just haven't got the time.
That's it. Right.
And you
Okay. Well,
play
thank
on
you very much.